The wind howled across the high plains like a lonely spirit, carrying dust, ash, and the scent of coming rain. The year was 1874, somewhere between the dying towns of Arizona Territory and the lands the maps forgot to name. The moon hung low, pale as a ghost, and a campfire flickered weakly against the night. The Apache warrior, known to few as Tazhi, rode in silence. His black stallion moved through the sagebrush as though it knew the darkness well. The man's chest bore a long scar, a mark left by a fight that should have killed him, and yet his eyes burned with the quiet fire of one who refused to die. He had no tribe now, no brothers, no reason to return anywhere. Until that night. He saw the fire first, a small trembling glow in the vast emptiness. Then he heard the faint hum of a woman's voice, soft and cracked like an old hymn. No sane woman would camp alone out here. Not where the coyotes sang and outlaws rode. Tazhi dismounted and approached, silent as the night. When the wind shifted, he saw her, a woman sitting beside the fire, wrapped in a tattered gray shawl. Her dark hair was streaked with dust and silver threads of age, though her face held a beauty that time had failed to steal. 30, perhaps, but her eyes carried the weight of someone who'd seen too much. She looked up as he stepped closer. No fear, no surprise, just recognition, as though she had been expecting him all along. "You've come far," she said, voice low, smoky. Tazhi didn't answer. His hand rested near the knife at his belt, more from habit than threat. "You can sit," she said softly, "if you're not here to kill me." He said nothing, but the silence between them was alive, stretching, testing, daring either to break it. Finally, he sat down. The woman poured him a cup of coffee, black as the night. "Name's Mira, though some folks forget it after they meet me." Tazhi's gaze flicked up. "Why? Because they don't stay," she said, staring into the fire. "Or they wish they hadn't." There was something haunting in her tone, something that crawled beneath his skin. He studied her trembling hands, the faint scar under her collarbone, the sadness in her voice that clung to every word like smoke. She looked at him suddenly, eyes sharp as cut glass. "You shouldn't have stopped here, Apache." He tilted his head slightly. "You think I fear you?" "I think you don't know what I am." A gust of wind scattered the fire's embers between them. For a moment, her face flickered between shadow and flame. And Tazhi thought he saw something, a shimmer of pain, or maybe guilt, deep in her gaze. She set the coffee pot aside and whispered, almost like a prayer, "Don't choose me. If you choose me, you'll regret it." Her words were quiet, but they struck him like a bullet. He didn't know why, but his chest tightened. The voice of this stranger, weary, broken, carried a warning that felt older than both of them. "What do you mean?" he asked. She smiled, but it was a hollow thing. "Every man who's ever chosen me has lost something he couldn't get back. Some lost land, some lost blood, some lost their soul." Tazhi's hand drifted toward the pouch at his belt where he kept a small charm carved by his mother. He had no soul left to lose, not after the war, the betrayal, the burning of his people. He leaned closer, eyes narrowing. "You speak like a ghost." "Maybe I am," she said. "Maybe that's why you found me." The fire cracked sharply, echoing through the stillness. For the first time in years, Tazhi felt unsure of what was real. Mira rose to her feet, the light tracing the edges of her face, the curve of her jaw, the trembling of her hands. She looked like someone caught between life and death, a creature made of regret and longing. "I'm heading north at sunrise," she said quietly. "You shouldn't follow." But she hesitated, just long enough for him to see it, the flicker of loneliness behind her warning. He said nothing, just watched as she turned her back to him, her shawl whipping in the cold wind. The words she'd spoken lingered in his mind long after she disappeared into the dark. "Don't choose me. If you choose me, you'll regret." Tazhi didn't know yet what haunted her, or what would come when the sun rose, but something deep in his blood whispered that fate had already chosen for them both, and it would not be kind. The dawn came cold and gray, spilling over the broken mesas and dead trees like a pale ghost. Tazhi hadn't slept. The woman's words echoed in his skull all night. Don't choose me. If you choose me, you'll regret. He had seen death. He had watched soldiers burn his people's lodges, had buried his mother with his own hands. But this woman's voice, it carried a different kind of warning. Not of bullets or blood, but of something darker. Something that reached past the flesh and into the spirit. When the first light touched the desert floor, he saw her tracks, small, light prints leading north toward the canyons. Against his better judgment, he followed. The desert stretched endlessly, painted gold and crimson by sunrise. Tazhi's stallion moved silently, hooves crunching over dry gravel. Every so often, he caught sight of her, Mira, walking far ahead, her gray shawl rippling in the wind like a flag of surrender. She never looked back, though he knew she felt him there. Hours passed before she stopped at a lonely spring hidden between two boulders. When she turned, her eyes held no surprise. You don't listen, she said, kneeling by the water. Tazhi dismounted, silent. I listen. I just don't run from ghosts. Then you'll die by one, she whispered. He ignored the threat and knelt beside her, cupping a handful of water to his lips. The cold bit at his tongue, grounding him. For a moment, the world was still, the rush of the spring, the soft rattle of wind through dry grass. Then she spoke again, her voice softer. Why follow me, Apache? You don't even know who I am. I know enough, he said. You're alone. You're running. Her eyes darted away. Maybe I'm being chased. By who? She hesitated, then smiled bitterly. Not who. What? The way she said it sent a chill down his spine. Tazhi studied her, the faint tremble in her hands, the way her eyes seemed to look through him rather than at him. You speak like someone who's cursed, he murmured. Maybe I am, she said again. Maybe that's what I meant when I told you not to choose me. The wind grew stronger as noon burned the land. They found shelter in a rocky hollow near the cliffs. Mira gathered dry brush and built a small fire, her movements slow but sure. Tazhi sat across from her, sharpening his knife, the rhythmic scrape filling the silence. Finally, she spoke. You ever loved someone so deeply you'd burn for them? He didn't look up. Once, she died. Then you understand. Her words drew his eyes to hers. There it was again, that strange sorrow that clung to her like a shadow. Who was he? He asked quietly, her breath caught. For a long time, she said nothing. Then, almost too low to hear, she whispered, a man I shouldn't have loved. A man who thought he could save me. Tazhi's hands stilled. What happened? Her gaze dropped to the fire. He died because of me. Everyone who tries to save me does. She lifted her eyes to him then, and for a heartbeat, Tazhi saw something impossible. The flickering firelight cast her shadow against the canyon wall. But it didn't move with her. It twisted differently, distorted, as if something inside the shadow wasn't hers at all. He rose slowly, knife still in hand. What are you? She smiled sadly. A warning you didn't listen to. Lightning cracked far off in the distance. The storm she'd promised now rolling over the desert. You can still leave, she said softly. Before it takes you too. Tazhi's voice was low, steady. I've already lost everything once. If this storm takes me, I'll face it standing. She turned away, and he thought he saw tears on her cheeks, or maybe just rain. That night, thunder rolled like drums of war. Mira sat close to the fire, whispering something under her breath, words in a language older than any he knew. Tazhi watched from the shadows, uneasy, every instinct warning him to ride away. But he stayed. The storm broke above them, and for a moment the fire flared high, casting light over her face. In her eyes, Tazhi saw something that made his blood run cold. Two reflections in her pupils, one hers, and one that wasn't, a man's shape, someone or something, was watching from within her dot, and Tazhi knew then that whatever haunted Mira wasn't done with her dot or with him. The storm came hard that night, pounding the desert with wind and rain as if the sky itself were breaking apart. The fire sputtered and hissed, and Mira's shawl clung to her like a second skin, soaked and trembling. Tazhi watched her closely, his instincts sharp. He had seen men go mad in war, but never had he seen someone look so haunted by what couldn't be seen. Lightning flashed across the cliffs, revealing her face for a heartbeat, pale, wild-eyed, lips moving in whispers. "Myra," he said, his deep voice cutting through the storm. "What are you saying?" She didn't look at him. "I'm trying to keep it away," she murmured, voice almost lost beneath the wind. "It doesn't like when I talk to others. It doesn't like when someone stays." Tazhi's hand rested on the hilt of his knife. "What doesn't?" Her eyes lifted to his, and what he saw there made the hair on his neck stand. Fear, real, raw, desperate fear. "Death," she whispered. "Not the kind that ends life, the kind that follows it." Thunder rolled over them like the growl of a god. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the land drenched and silent. The smell of wet sage filled the air. Mira sat on a rock near the edge of the canyon, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Tazhi walked toward her, his bare chest still glistening with rain, muscles tensed like a predator's. "You didn't sleep," he said. "I can't," she replied. "Every time I close my eyes, I see him." Tazhi frowned. "The man you loved?" She nodded faintly. "He wasn't just a man. He was the one who tried to bind the thing that cursed me." Tazhi crouched beside her. "Tell me." Her fingers dug into the fabric of her shawl. "His name was Jonas, a preacher's son. Kind eyes, steady hands. We met when he came west to build a mission. I thought he could save me." Her voice trembled. "But when he found out what followed me, what I'd brought with me, he tried to drive it away. He read his scriptures, burned sage, prayed until his voice broke. And for a moment, I thought it worked. Until the fire in his church went out and the wind started whispering his name." She turned toward Tazhi, eyes wide and hollow. "The next morning, I found him dead. His eyes open, his mouth full of ash. And the whisper changed. It started saying mine." The words chilled Tazhi to the bone. He rose to his feet, scanning the horizon. The desert was quiet again, too quiet. Even the birds were gone. "You think this thing is after you?" he asked. Mira laughed softly, bitterly. "No, it's in me. It always has been. Since the day I watched my family burn. Since the day I asked God why it wasn't me." She stood then, face wet with tears and rain, and whispered, "It answers, you know. Sometimes in the wind, sometimes in dreams." "And what does it say?" She looked at him, really looked at him, and her lips trembled. "It says it wants you next." That night, they camped near an old cottonwood tree, its trunk hollow and half dead. The fire was small, the silence heavier than the desert heat. Tazhi sat sharpening his knife again, his eyes never leaving her. She sat across from him, her hands folded tightly, her gaze lost in the flames. "You could still ride away," she said softly. "Maybe," he replied. "But something tells me it would follow me too." She gave a small, pained smile. "You don't understand. This isn't something you can fight. It doesn't bleed." Tazhi leaned forward, his deep voice steady. "Everything that haunts the living came from something that once lived. It can be stopped." Her breath hitched. "You don't know what you're saying." Lightning cracked in the distance again, faint but sharp. For a heartbeat, the shadows around the fire seemed to stretch, bending toward them. The light flickered, dimmed, and Mira gasped. Tazhi turned sharply and saw it. A shape, half human, half smoke, rising from the hollow of the cottonwood. Eyes like dying embers. It moved like fog but carried the weight of a soul that refused to rest. Mira's voice shook. It followed us. Tazhi rose, the knife gleaming in his hand. Then it should have stayed hidden. The thing's voice came like the wind through dry bones, a whisper that wasn't sound but memory. You were warned. Mira screamed. The fire flared and Tazhi lunged forward, not sure if he was fighting the thing or the fear inside him. And as the flames roared high for a single heartbeat, he saw Jonas's face in the smoke, eyes open, mouth full of ash. The rain had ended, but the air still trembled with its memory. The storm's growl had quieted to a whisper that threaded through the canyon, carrying the scent of wet earth and smoke. Tazhi stood beside the dying fire, his chest heaving, knife still wet with rain or something darker. Mira knelt near the fallen cottonwood, eyes wide with terror and disbelief. The hollow where the spirit had appeared now looked empty, nothing but rotting bark and ash. Yet the air hummed with something unseen, like the echo of a scream that hadn't ended. Tazhi approached her slowly. What was that thing? Her voice broke when she spoke. It was him, or what's left of him. The preacher? She nodded, tears mingling with the mud on her cheeks. Jonas tried to save me. He died for it. But part of him never left. He became what I carry. Tazhi frowned. You said it was inside you. It is, she whispered, pressing a trembling hand against her chest. Every time someone gets close to me, it finds them. It wants them. It feeds off their will to stay. Tazhi's jaw tightened. And yet, you told me not to choose you. Her eyes met his tired, desperate, honest. Because I didn't want it to choose you too. The wind howled through the canyon like a warning. They didn't speak for a long time after that. Mira sat near the fire, shivering despite the heat, while Tazhi walked the perimeter, scanning the darkness. The desert, usually alive with sound, was silent. He could still feel it, the presence. Not gone, just watching Dot as dawn broke, painting the cliffs in blood-colored light, Mira finally spoke. There's a place north of here, she said softly, where this all began. A mission buried in the sand. If we reach it, maybe what? Maybe I can end this. Tazhi studied her. And what happens to you? She looked at him for a long moment before answering. I think you already know. He did. And yet, when she started walking, he followed. The journey north was brutal. The sun returned with vengeance, burning the land dry again. Dust rose with every step. They shared silence more than words. Two souls bound by something neither could escape. At midday, they rested beneath a lone mesquite tree. Tazhi tore a strip of jerky and handed it to her. She took it but didn't eat. Do you regret following me? She asked quietly. He looked at her, expression unreadable. Regret doesn't bring the dead back. I follow what feels right. She smiled faintly. Then you're a fool. Maybe, but a living fool. Her laughter was soft, brittle. Not for long, Apache. It's growing stronger. Every mile we go north, it feels closer, like it's calling me home. Tazhi reached out then, gently lifting her chin so she'd meet his gaze. You're not going alone, Mira. Her breath caught. For the first time since he'd met her, her eyes softened. You shouldn't say that, she whispered. That's when it takes hold, when someone means it. But he didn't pull away. He just looked at her, the firelight of his spirit flickering in his dark eyes. That night, the moon rose red over the desert, bleeding light across the sand. They made camp at the edge of a dry riverbed. Mira sat near the fire again, humming an old hymn, a sound both sorrowful and beautiful. Tazhi listened in silence until he noticed something strange. The shadow behind her was not her own. It stretched longer, wider, its head turned toward him even though hers did not. He rose quietly, hand on his knife. Then Mira's voice broke mid-song. Her body stiffened, her eyes turning glassy. "Tazhi," she whispered. "It's here." The wind picked up, swirling ash into the air. The fire bent backward, as if sucked toward her. "Mira!" he shouted, rushing forward. But her body convulsed and a deep, hollow voice spilled from her lips. Not hers. Not human. She was mine first, Apache. And now she brings you to me. The ground trembled. The riverbed cracked open, exhaling a blast of freezing air. Tazhi grabbed her shoulders. "Fight it." Mira's face twisted in pain. I can't." He drew his knife, pressing its blade against the charm around his neck. "Then I'll fight for you." The spirit's laughter came from everywhere and nowhere. "You can't fight what's already inside her." Tazhi's knife glowed faintly, the charm burning against his skin. He'd seen this before, his mother's stories of Vikiate, the spirit that clings to sorrow. He shouted into the storm, voice fierce and defiant. "Then it can have me instead." Mira's body went still. For a breath, the night held its silence. Then the spirit answered, "So be it." And the fire went out. When Tazhi opened his eyes, the fire was gone. Only cold ash remained, glowing faintly like dying stars across the sand. His body ached, his breath shallow. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of smoke and sorrow. Mira knelt beside him, tears streaking her face. "Tazhi, you shouldn't have said that." He tried to speak, but his throat burned as if he had swallowed fire. "What happened?" Her voice trembled. "It took your word as truth. You offered yourself. It's inside you now." Tazhi's hand went to his chest. His skin felt fever hot. The veins beneath darkened like roots spreading under the surface. The charm around his neck was cracked. The sacred carving split clean down the middle. He sat up slowly, pain grinding through his ribs. "Good," he rasped. "Then it can leave you alone." Mira shook her head, eyes wide with grief. "You don't understand. It doesn't leave. It multiplies. It feeds on what's shared." He stared at her, realization sinking like a stone into his gut. "You mean it's in both of us now?" She nodded. "Bound by choice. That's how curses survive, by love, by sacrifice, by someone foolish enough to care." The sun rose over the desert like an accusation. Tazhi's skin gleamed with sweat, his breath ragged. Mira guided him along the narrow trail toward the northern ruins, the mission where it all began. She walked ahead, her shawl fluttering in the dry wind, her steps light but determined. "Once we reach the chapel," she said softly, "I can finish what Jonas started. But it has to be done at sunrise. The curse hides in the dark. The light forces it to show itself." Tazhi managed a faint smirk. "Light doesn't scare what's already in the shadows." She glanced back at him, her eyes softening. "You talk like a man who's seen too much death." He met her gaze. "I am deaf, Mira. I just keep walking after it." For a moment, she almost smiled until the ground shuddered beneath them. A whisper drifted through the canyon, cold and sharp, curling around their names. "You can't hide from me. You chose." Mira froze. The voice came from nowhere and everywhere, the wind, the stones, their own hearts. Tazhi gritted his teeth. "Keep walking." But she grabbed his arm, her fingers trembling. "No, it's already awake." The air grew colder. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, bending across the sand like hands reaching for them. Then it came, a figure half made of smoke, its face a blur of ash and memory. Its voice was a growl laced with sorrow. "I took your vow, warrior. You belong to me now." Tazhi stood tall, bare chest rising and falling, muscles tense beneath the morning light. "If you want me," he said, voice calm, "you'll have to take all of me." The spirit's laughter echoed through the canyon like breaking glass. "Then she have nothing left." It lunged forward, a wave of black mist striking him square in the chest. Tazhi staggered, falling to his knees, his hands clutching the dirt. Mira screamed, rushing to him, but when she touched his skin, she recoiled. His body was ice cold. His eyes flickered between his own and something else, something ancient and cruel. For hours he fought it, teeth clenched, sweat pouring down his body, whispering his mother's prayers in Apache tongue. Mira stayed beside him, her hands pressed to his chest, whispering old hymns that mixed with his words until their voices became one. At last his breathing slowed. The veins that had darkened across his chest began to fade. Myra exhaled shakily. "You fought it off." He shook his head weakly. "No, it's waiting. Watching through me." She looked toward the horizon, where the old mission ruins finally appeared, crumbling walls rising from the desert like the bones of a dead faith. "That's where it ends," she said. "For both of us, maybe." Tazhi stood, unsteady but determined. "If that's what it takes." They reached the ruins by dusk. The chapel's wooden door was half burned, the cross above it broken. Inside, candles still stood melted into stone, as if time had refused to move on. Mira stepped forward, voice shaking. "Jonas died right there." She pointed to a blackened mark on the floor. "He said the curse feeds on guilt, on what we can't forgive." Tazhi looked around the shadows. "Then tell it you forgive yourself." Her eyes filled with tears. "You think I haven't tried?" He stepped closer, his presence calm, steady. "Then let me try for you." Before she could answer, the wind slammed the door shut. The candles flared to life on their own. The spirit's voice filled the chapel, thick with rage. No forgiveness. Only debt. Mira clutched her shawl. "Tazhi." He drew his knife, its cracked charm now glowing faintly again. "You said it began here," he said quietly. "Then it ends here too." He stepped into the center of the chapel as the shadows gathered, swirling around him like a living storm. The chapel loomed before them, blackened by fire and time, silent as a grave. The desert wind whipped Mira's gray shawl around her shoulders, and Tazhi's bare chest gleamed in the fading light, muscles tense and ready. Every step toward the mission felt heavier, the shadows stretching and twisting across the cracked stone like living things dot inside. The air was thick, heavy with decay and sorrow. Candles burned crookily, their wax melted into grotesque shapes. Tazhi's eyes scanned the darkness. He could feel the presence now, not distant, but surrounding them, coiling like smoke around the pillars and rafters. Mira stepped forward, voice trembling. "This is where Jonas fell, where it all began." Tazhi placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Then it ends here too." Her eyes widened. "Do you understand what that means?" He nodded. "We face it together. Or we don't survive at all." The spirit appeared suddenly, a swirl of black smoke and ember eyes. Its form flickered between Jonas's face and something inhuman. Its voice a rasp that filled the chapel. "You brought him here. You bring her here." "Fools." Tazhi stepped forward, knife in hand, the cracked charm at his neck glowing faintly. "I brought no one here to die. You end this now, or you face me." The spirit laughed, a sound like dry bones rattling. "You cannot fight what you cannot touch. It feeds on your fear, your hope, your bond." Mira's hand shook as she reached for Tazhi's arm. "It's stronger than both of us. You don't understand." Tazhi's voice was calm, deep, unwavering. "Then I'll show you what human will can do." The spirit lunged, moving faster than the eye could follow. Shadows whipped around the chapel, tearing at the walls, the floor beneath them trembling. Tazhi dodged, knife flashing, the charm glowing brighter as he chanted in Apache tongue. The air hummed, the spirit recoiling, hissing with rage. Mira's voice joined his, whispering an old hymn. The combination of voices, warrior and woman, courage and fear, created a resonance that made the shadows pause. The spirit twisted, howling, smoke forming jagged shapes. Jonas's face appearing and vanishing in torment. "You can't hold me." It spat. "She is mine. She always will be." Tazhi's eyes locked on Mira's. "Not if I have anything to say." She nodded, and together they stepped forward, closing the circle around the spirit. The wind seemed to still, the desert holding its breath. Then Mira did something Tazhi hadn't expected. She raised her hands, palms open, and spoke words she had kept hidden for years, a confession to the spirit, to Jonas, to herself. "I forgive you," she whispered. "I forgive the pain you brought. I forgive the love that failed. And I forgive myself." The air shivered. The spirit faltered, flickering, its ember eyes dimming. Jonas's face appeared one last time, peaceful, almost human. Tazhi stepped closer, holding the knife lightly. "Release her," he said. "Or take me too." The spirit's form shrank, twisted, and then, with a final whisper that sounded almost like a sigh, it vanished into nothingness. The chapel was silent again. Mira sank to the floor, trembling. Tazhi knelt beside her, placing a protective arm around her shoulders. "It's gone," he said quietly. She buried her face in her hands. I thought I'd never be free. That it would always follow me. That anyone who cared would be doomed." "You're free," he whispered. "Because you fought it. And because I stayed." Her hands lifted, wet with tears, and she met his gaze. "Why did you stay?" He smiled faintly, muscles relaxing for the first time in days. "Because even a warrior can see what's worth saving. And you're worth it." The chapel, once a place of fear and shadow, now felt different. The air was lighter, though still tinged with ash and memory. Sunlight spilled through broken windows, illuminating the ruins, the flickering candles. And the two of them, survivor and protector, bound by struggle, hope, and something unspoken. Mira's lips quivered. "I never thought anyone could face that." "For me," Tazhi reached out, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. "You don't have to think about it." I did. For the first time, she allowed herself a small smile, a smile that didn't carry warning, pain, or regret. And for the first time in years, Tazhi felt something he thought the desert had taken from him: peace. They rose together, stepping out into the morning sun, the ruins behind them, the vast desert stretching forward like a promise. The wind no longer whispered death, only the soft sigh of freedom and new beginnings. The sun rose slowly over the desert, painting the cracked earth in gold and crimson. The ruins of the old chapel lay behind them, silent and empty, no trace of the smoke-like spirit that had haunted Mira for years. For the first time since Tazhi had met her, the air felt clean, untouched by fear or shadow. Mira walked beside Tazhi, her steps careful, almost hesitant. The gray shawl she had wrapped herself in so many times now hung loosely, the weight of it lifted by something she could not yet name. Tazhi's bare chest gleamed in the sunlight, sweat and dust mixing into a bronze sheen. His muscles moved with a natural grace as he scanned the horizon, alert for any sign that the darkness might return. But there was only quiet. "You did it," she whispered, voice trembling. "You stayed, and you fought it with me." Tazhi shrugged, a small, dry smile on his lips. "We fought it together. You had the strength. I only had the hands to hold you steady." She glanced up at him, eyes glistening, and for the first time she allowed herself to hope. "Do you Do you think it's truly gone? He studied the horizon, the desert stretching endlessly before them. I do. Shadows can hide, but they cannot survive in the light forever. And I think this light— He paused, looking at her. This light is enough. Mira let out a shaky laugh. I never thought I'd see a day like this. Free, truly free. No whispers, no warnings. Nothing chasing me. Tazhi took her hand gently, rough fingers brushing against hers. Freedom is never given. It's earned. And you earned it, Mira. Every day you survived, every choice you made, it led us here. She looked down at their hands, her breath catching. You chose to come with me, even when I told you not to. Even when I said, don't choose me, you'll regret it. Tazhi finished softly, his voice low but steady. I heard you, but I also heard the truth behind the words. You didn't want anyone to suffer for you. I don't fear the burden, Mira. I carry it with you. A gentle wind swept across the desert, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. Mira's shawl fluttered around her like a banner of victory, her dark hair catching the sunlight. For the first time in years, she felt the weight inside her chest lift. The spirit had gone, but it had left something behind. A quiet, enduring bond between them, a bond stronger than fear, stronger than sorrow, stronger than any curse. Tazhi's gaze softened. The world can be cruel, Myra. It can take everything. But it cannot take what we've chosen to protect in each other. That, even the darkest spirit cannot touch. Mira smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and awe. I never believed I could love again. Not after Jonas. Not after everything. Tazhi's hand tightened around hers. Love doesn't die because of curses or ghosts. It survives because of courage. And you? You are the bravest person I've ever met. For a long moment, they walked in silence, the desert around them calm and endless. The sun climbed higher, casting warm light over their bodies, turning the ruins behind them into golden silhouettes. Every step felt like shedding the memories of past fears. Every breath like reclaiming a life stolen from them. Mira stopped and turned to him, her eyes clear now, unburdened. Tazhi, what now? He smiled faintly, the first truly relaxed expression she had seen on his face. Now we live. We choose our path, together. She nodded, letting herself trust him completely, something she hadn't done in years. Together, she echoed. The wind swirled once more, playful now, carrying the scent of new beginnings. Tazhi lifted his head, muscles tensing instinctively, not for battle but for the promise of life ahead. Mira stepped closer, pressing her hand against his chest, feeling the strength and warmth that had protected her through the darkest night. No shadows, no whispers, no curse remained. Only them, two souls who had survived the impossible, who had faced the spirit that haunted the land, and who had chosen each other not out of desperation, but out of courage and respect. The desert stretched ahead, wild, empty, and full of promise. Tazhi and Mira walked forward side by side, their shadows long behind them, their steps steady. The curse that had bound her for years was gone. The Apache warrior who had stood by her was real, solid and alive. And for the first time, Mira allowed herself to believe in something more than survival, hope, freedom, and a love that had been earned through fire, storm, and shadow. The sun rose higher, bathing the desert in warmth. And together, they disappeared into the horizon, leaving the past behind, stepping fully into a life they had fought to claim.